here. A minute of glory.
Today I'm playing some Shadowline, something I haven't done in months. I wanted to talk about what's up with the game at the moment and also the future of Shadowline. As you may know, Shadowline is a free-to-play FPS with a kind of roguelike co-op mode that is called Expedition. And you'll also be able to play several PvP modes such as TDM, Conquest, Plant the Bomb and Escort, to mention some of the traditional PvP game modes in the game. The game was released into early access in September last year, and there's not a date set yet that we know of when it comes to the final release, meaning the full version of the game. This game has mostly positive reviews on Steam, and I've had some fun myself playing the game from time to time. Although it's needed to say that the game, and especially the PvP aspect of it, feels quite generic, meaning that there's really nothing new or something there that we haven't seen before in a PvP game. But even so, the game gained some popularity, being a somewhat polished game for an early access kind of game or product. However, the game has lost quite a few players after its early access release, going from around 11.5k players on average on Steam down to around 550 players on average in the late spring of 2023, around 8 months later. Usually a game drops some player or drop players after a release, even an early access release, but of course it must be a bit alarming that it has dropped this much already. So what about the future then of Shadowline? First off, the devs has been careful to announce any dates yet when it comes to full release of the game, and also the fact that they're planning to add crossplay into Shadowline as well, which I believe is a must, and that alone can definitely boost the player count some again when it happens. I also see that there's been continuous updates the last few months, both fixes when it comes to bugs, but also some more noticeable changes such as weapon balance changes and stuff like that. This kind of work and activity is of course very important to see from a kind of player side of things, alongside with some new content as well, which I discovered when playing the game once more. I'm talking about some new PvP maps, but also new content in the PvE mode, which was the mode that felt as if it has gotten most of the attention from the devs recently. And to be honest, the PvE still feels as maybe the most interesting part to play in Shadowline. Playing together with two other players, taking on a variety of missions that can be quite enjoyable. Of course, it might also become repetitive depending on how much you decide to play it. I guess that goes for most of these kind of PvE missions after all. Playing PvE is also most likely the best way to unlock weapons faster in Shadowline, because the tier progression in the game is still very slow in my opinion, almost tedious, and it's also quite obvious that some of the higher tier weapons are better, which puts you, when you start to play PvP, in a disadvantage already from the start. So what does it take then to regain an audience, meaning a larger player base when it comes to the upcoming future of Shadowline? As I see it, the game lacks overall when it comes to new content, and coming back quite some months since I last played the game, I was honestly expecting a bit more, and maybe this is one of the reasons that Shadowline has lost quite a few players since the early access launch. Feel free to fill in here what you think as well if you're playing the game. I also believe that the progression system, alongside with more job regarding weapon balance, is needed to make the PvP a better and tighter experience overall. I hope that the devs have the crossplay aspect also mentioned earlier of the game ready at launch, or at least close to launch, because I see examples of other FPS titles where this hasn't been the case, and it has not been beneficial for the game when it gets implemented maybe a year after the game has been fully released. As often when making a game nowadays, there's a lot of factors that comes into play if the game will succeed or not. I guess one of the problems when it comes to a game such as Shadowline is the identity of the game. Who is it for? We have to take into consideration that a roguelike kind of shooter or hero shooter, meaning characters with abilities, aren't for everyone either. When I play Shadowline, it feels as if the developers has taken quite some inspiration from a variety of shooters and then put those elements and partly mechanics as well into Shadowline. I'm thinking about games such as Call of Duty, Valorant, and maybe some Apex Legends as well. Does that become bland, or is it something that feels attractive for you as a player? Well, the future of Shadowline will most likely be determined due to some of the decisions that I've talked about and mentioned here in this video, but also how the full game will be received, since the developers have stated that there will be more content when it gets out in the full release kind of version. There's some other FPS games also in the making now that might be released around the same time as Shadowline if they decide to make the full release in the later part of, let's say, 2023 this year or the beginning of 2024. That might also have an effect of the success of the game. I guess we'll know more about that later when they do give us a release date when it comes to Shadowline. Towards the end of the video, I can be honest and say that I've seen some potential in this game that unfortunately, in my opinion, hasn't been fully reached or accomplished, at least not yet. I hope for the sake of Frag Labs, the devs behind Shadowline, that they're able to present a roadmap at launch that gives a strong incentive for both existing players to continue to play Shadowline, but also something that is attractive for new players in order to get into the game. With that said, good luck Shadowline, and thanks also for watching my video, and feel free to share your thoughts and experiences when it comes to Shadowline. So, until the next time, peace and out.
Summon your own man.
Reloading.
No messing with me.
Excellent work, team.
I will not rest. Easy flags. Don't stand in my way.